In the early 1990s, Sega didn't just compete with Nintendo, it beat them. For a brief moment in gaming history, Sega controlled the future. Kids everywhere were sprinting through Green Hill Zone, blasting robots, and believing one thing: Sega was unstoppable. And yet today, Sega doesn't even make consoles anymore. No new hardware, no next-gen system. So how did one of the most powerful names in video game history rise to the top and then disappear from the console business entirely? This is the incredible rise and fall of Sega. When people think of Sega, they think of Sonic the Hedgehog, the Genesis, and the console wars. But Sega's story begins long before home gaming, all the way back in 1940 in Hawaii. The company was originally called Standard Games, producing coin-operated machines like slot machines for US military bases. In the early 1950s, new gambling laws forced a major shift. The business moved to Japan and rebranded as Service Games of Japan, selling coin-operated machines to American military bases across Asia. By the 1960s, Sega expanded into pinball machines and jukeboxes, becoming a major force in the arcade industry. In 1965, Service Games merged with Rosen Enterprises, founded by David Rosen. The combined company became Sega Enterprises, a name derived from Service Games. One of their earliest hits was Periscope, an electromechanical submarine shooting game that became extremely popular in arcades around the world. Throughout the 1970s, backed by Gulf and Western, Sega grew aggressively. They operated arcades, acquired competitors, and became one of the largest arcade game manufacturers in the United States. But everything changed in 1983 with the video game crash. Poor quality games flooded the market, consumer confidence collapsed, and the entire industry suffered. Sega was hit hard. Gulf and Western sold Sega's North American operations, while Sega's Japanese division was purchased by investors led by David Rosen and financed by Isao Okawa. With arcades declining, Sega made a risky decision that would define its future: entering the home console market. Sega's first console was the SG-1000, released in Japan on July 15, 1983, the exact same day as Nintendo's Famicom. The timing couldn't have been worse. The SG-1000 struggled, but it sold better than expected, motivating Sega to keep going. This led to the SG-1002, then the Sega Mark III, later known as the Master System. In 1986, Sega entered the US market, but Nintendo dominated nearly 90% of home gaming. Developers were locked into Nintendo's ecosystem, Sega's marketing was handled by Tonka, and distribution was poorly managed. Despite capable hardware, the Master System couldn't compete. Then came the turning point. Sega's next console, the Genesis, changed everything. It was a 16-bit system released years before Nintendo's next console, giving Sega a major technological advantage. Games looked better, sounded better, and played faster. Sega leaned into this advantage with aggressive marketing, openly challenging Nintendo with slogans like "Genesis does what Nintendo don't." Sega targeted an older, edgier audience. The black console design, high-energy commercials, celebrity-branded sports games, and uncensored titles like Mortal Kombat made the Genesis feel cooler than anything Nintendo offered. The final piece was Sonic the Hedgehog. Fast, rebellious, and full of attitude, Sonic became Sega's mascot. Bundling Sonic with the Genesis pushed sales even higher. By the early 1990s, Sega controlled over 60% of the US console market. It was one of the most remarkable underdog victories in business history. But Nintendo wasn't done. In 1991, Nintendo launched the Super Nintendo, bundled with Super Mario World and followed by iconic titles like The Legend of Zelda, A Link to the Past, Super Mario Kart, and Donkey Kong Country. Nintendo reclaimed market share, and although the Genesis performed incredibly well, the Super Nintendo ultimately sold more units worldwide. Sega then began making critical mistakes. The Sega CD, an expensive add-on with limited games, damaged consumer trust and gained negative attention during congressional hearings on video game violence. Next came the Sega Saturn. Rushed to market in 1995 to beat Sony's PlayStation, Sega launched early with limited stock, only 6 games and a $400 price tag. At the same event, Sony announced the PlayStation would cost $299. The battle was over before it began. Sega's final console, the Dreamcast, launched in 1998. It was innovative, featuring online connectivity, but the technology and internet infrastructure weren't ready. Internal company conflicts caused delays and rising costs, while the PlayStation 2 loomed just ahead. Sales collapsed. In 2001, Sega officially exited the console business. The company survived thanks largely to Isao Okawa, who personally donated nearly $700 million to help Sega transition into a third-party developer. He passed away shortly after the announcement. By 2003, Sega became profitable again and later merged with Sammy Corporation in a $1.5 billion deal. Today, Sega remains successful as a third-party developer, acquiring studios and partnering with major brands. But the era of Sega consoles is over. Sega's story is one of bold innovation, massive risk, and painful mistakes. They came closer than anyone to defeating Nintendo, and for a brief moment, they actually did. Now I want to hear from you. Did you ever own a Sega console? And how did it compare to Nintendo? Do you think Sega will ever return to making hardware? If you enjoyed this deep dive into gaming and business history, make sure to subscribe to Innovate Atlas for more stories like this. Thanks for watching.